and get some work up shy and wait. If they'll tender this old ghost, give their pay. I wasn't made for love, so hard to know when to hold her in your arms, when to let don't see the lightning ball, don't feel the wet. All I see is her blessed face. All I feel is regret. All I have's a ways to go, dreams that won't fail. As I cross the mountains on the Colorado Trail.
Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. On the road here in Portland, Oregon, continuing to steam along here with a guy who is an incredible poet, wordsmith, but also a guy whose his musical skills have been improving over time. He's kind of at a peak today. Larry Beckett, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake.
It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, man.
Hey, can you talk about being that you were a poet coming up in the formative years, sort of looked at as a sort of a lonely stepchild, and how gratifying it is now to have honed yourself where you're playing better instrumental music than you've ever played in your life? Can you talk about that evolution?
Well, yeah, I mean, like almost everyone.
The audience wants to see you.
Right.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with music. Would have been a composer if I had a second life, but at the beginning I couldn't sing, couldn't play guitar or piano. Took guitar lessons from Jim Fielder. I think there was one lesson.
You got a lesson from Fielder?
Yeah, and then I played the C chord till my fingers bled, and that was that lesson. And and then I would play piano with no training at all, but over the years, I never stopped. I played every day and sung every day until now. I can sing on pitch and hopefully, and play piano and play guitar, and I've come to realize, just in the last couple of years, that I've actually turned myself into a musician. I've joined that crowd that I always wanted to join.
Who are you collaborating with now? I know there's some cats over in England that you've been.
That's right. Well, yeah, and so like a couple of years ago, there were this band called the Long Lost Band, headed by Stuart Anthony, and they were fans of Buckley and Beckett. And so I connected with them on Facebook, and then that eventually led to a collaboration on first one song, and then 2 songs, and then an entire album released on Bandcamp called One More Mile, which includes an elegy for John Lennon. And actually, because of I was being published, my book, Paul Bunyan, my long poem, Paul Bunyan, was published in England by Smokestack Books. And I thought, what the hell, something's happening in England, and so I ought to go there. So I did.
Can you sing, can you do that poem for us right now?
Yeah, I can.
Please.
Well, actually, it takes 3 hours, so I don't think we have the band.
Do we have no? Can we get like
the John Lennon,
an abridged version?
Well, yes. I was going to come to that. I was going to talk about rhythm a little bit.
Go ahead.
And use that as an example.
Do it.
But so went over there and did like a 4-city tour, 2 with the rock band, and I really have a great love of poetry fused with a rock band, as Dylan has done so beautifully in the past. And so I was actually able to read my elegy for John Lennon in an art gallery across the street from the Cavern Club in Liverpool to the people of Liverpool. And then I threw the manuscript onto the floor, and the rock band then kicked in and sang it. And that was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me.
Explain why.
Does it really need an explanation? I mean, I can read you the lyrics, and you'll see why.
No, is it just the
be actually, addressing the wrong of his murder to the people who most felt its loss. Then I felt really most fully alive as a poet. I actually think of poetry as something that is read out loud and is comparable to music. It has its own music. And being published in books or elsewhere is, to me, secondary. To me, the first thing is to read it to the people. And as for that reason, I can read you the elegy for John Lennon if you want to hear it. Okay. John Lennon. We listen to old rock and roll under the comeback sun, my girl and I, and talk of kids. But oh, where's John? I watched the game that winter night. The newsman said he's gone. Imagine there's no heaven. Oh, then oh, where's John? I sent my love to Yoko and dear Julian and Sean. But all that they could answer me was, oh, where's John? I don't know why that man cracked up or who sold him the gun. It's you and I who make the laws. And oh, where's John? That little war, the English let the Argentine boys down into the waves. And who spoke out? And oh, where's John? I love the earth like always, but it's hard to write a song. It's not as good as it once was. And oh, where's John?
The cats that you're playing with, Stuart Anthony,
Yeah.
how did they make you a better instrumental musician? How did they push you out of your comfort zone? Where did you learn grow the most?
Well, playing live, that to me, that's the ultimate. So it's not a gig, it's the real thing. So I had to practice solos for some of the songs and make sure I nailed it every time. So that was a great experience. And actually, Stuart and I, the band has since broken up, but Stuart and I have gone on, and we're working on a new album called Love and Trial. And it is based on his love of Greece and Greek music, and includes lyrics by the lost poet Orpheus and the philosopher Heraclitus, sonnets on modern Greece by me, and a number of songs, all with Greek-inspired music played on authentic instruments. Not like anything anyone has ever heard for a long, long time.
What kind of time signatures?
Yeah, the time signatures are all over the place.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you playing?
And I'm not playing, I'm only reciting. So about half of them are poetry recitations and the other half
in Latin?
Vocals. No, in my translations or my original poetry.
Oh, I dig.
Yeah.
I dig.
It's amazing. An amazing piece. Love and Trial.
The audience wants you to play more, so why don't you just play the other tune you have in your bag?
Yeah, sure. I got another one.
Joined here by a legend, Larry Beckett. What are you going to play?
Well, a legend, that's somebody who contributed something at some point and is still alive.
Yeah, you just said you did. That was what went down in England.
Okay.
It's morning, but that quarter moon's in your gray heaven still. At the sagging docks, the jobs all flash like pigeons out of my hand. I ask a down
Larry Beckett, performing here on the Jake Feinberg Show. There's a couple things I wanted to follow up with you on from our first radio interview. This idea of mystery as it relates to when you actually get inspiration for writing songs. I mean, this is something that's been happening your whole
Yes.
Can you talk about the dark tunnels and also when you see the light in these? I mean, because I feel very much the same feel on this trip. So I just want you to talk about that mystery and the befuddlement, but also the fact that it always keeps coming back around.
Well, mystery is a good word for it. I've always taken the approach that if I work on writing every day, if I can, and if inspiration comes out of the mystery, then great. If it doesn't, then I just work at it with my craft and try to bring it up to the level of inspired work. So I don't let the lack of connection stop me. And what that connection is, mystery is a good word because I really don't know what it is. I remember Yeats saying that the more that the unconscious gets into your poetry, the stronger it is. And at some point, a few decades ago, I started to be able to open the doors between my conscious mind and my unconscious mind, so that where other people might have to dream or have an unconscious image expressed some other way, I could just open the door and look at it. I could be riding a bus and be seeing a vision. And that greatly increased my ability to access the kind of things that I wanted to write about. Still happening, I'm happy to say.
I was actually hoping you could talk about a specific point of inspiration, maybe this year or last year, where this manifested the way you described it.
Yeah, sure. A perfect example is I was dutifully reading an anthology of contemporary American poetry, which I...
Dutifully. It was a duty. It wasn't out of...
No, it was a duty. I mean, there's a few poets in there that I dearly love, like Charles Wright, but there's a lot of poets in there that I hate and actually loathe, like John Ashbery, for example.
You mentioned that cat.
Yeah, I just threw all the Ashbery people off.
Why are you so down on him?
I don't think he knows I don't think he values language. And so that's a different way of writing poetry that is alien to me. To me, people who value language would be like Shakespeare, Keats, Gerard Manley Hopkins, Yeats, people like that who, every word they roll around on their tongue. John Ashbery is writing this kind of blasé stuff that it doesn't really matter. There's not...
It's the equivalent of elevator music?
I wouldn't go that far, but there's not the...
There's no depth.
There's not the concern with the right word or the beauty of the language, and the beauty of how that word works with the other words, and so on. That, to me, that he is negating poetry itself. So anyway, I'm dutifully reading because, well, some of it I like, but I do want to be not unacquainted with the works of my peers, in case I'm ever asked.
Right.
So
that's good notes. That's smart.
Yeah. Well, and
but dutiful.
And I happened to be reading John Ashbery, and one morning, and suddenly a verse came into my mind about how, and it was about a lot of things. It was about what song does for us. I've always wondered, why do people even write songs? What are they trying to make a buck? Is that the reason, or are they send a message to someone? I don't even know. And what does the song amount to in the end? And I started to come to something about about how the song, in a way, in the end, outweighs the life. That 100 years from now, it may be that all that remains of you and me and our conversation is some song that is referred to. The song will live, and everything else dissolve. So that idea obsessed me, and I got one verse, and I thought, well, that's bizarre, and I went on reading, and then another verse popped into my mind, and I thought, okay, well, now this is getting serious. I should stop and write this down, and I wrote the whole song down about how, in the end, when the century is dust, all that will be left of us is only the song. And that was beautifully composed by Stuart Anthony and incredibly sung on the new album, Love and Trial.
Oh, well,
does that answer your question?
No, there are no right or wrong answers on the Jay Carver show.
Well,
but here's the thing.
So I don't know where that came from. I actually thought I would never write another song, and then that's clearly not the case.
Right, and
I think that's what you were referring to earlier.
Of course, no, it was an example of inspiration. It was tangible.
Yeah.
But what about I Can't See You?
What about it?
I want to know about that where that came from, because that has been re-released. The Bohemians,
Summer Princess, Midnight Maiden.
Larry Beckett on drums.
I was asked to participate in a volume called Kerouac on Record. Oh. Kerouac on Record is a book brilliantly edited by. That's right. By Simon Warner and Jim Sampas, who is the executor of the Kerouac estate. Simon Warner of the University of Leeds in England.
Mm-hmm.
And this book is about how music influenced the writing of Jack Kerouac and how Jack Kerouac's writing has influenced music subsequently. It's a really interesting
Are you able to go both ways there? Can you talk about how...
Yes.
Let's go both.
And actually, my essay, we're going to forget the original question, but that's okay.
No, it's whatever. It's a jam.
It's a jam. My essay is about how when he wrote his first true book of poetry called San Francisco Blues, he was actually trying to write what he called a series of blues choruses, as though he were not a poet but a saxophone player in a jazz band, and blowing out these poems.
Yeah, right.
And that was his concept, to bring improvisation to the front, and not revise. And
just for, bringing the lyrics to the front.
Yeah, that's right. So what he did was he had these little notepads that he would have in his big American front pocket and pull it out, and he would write a poem as big as would fit on the notepad. And that was exactly the same kind of constraint as playing sax solo in a 12-bar blues, where it goes from 1 to 4 to 1, to 5 and back to 1. To him, that was the same constraint.
Wow.
But it was translated to literature. And then he would just improvise something on the page. That was chorus number 22. And I think in the back of his mind, the radical rhythms and kind of high-flown imagination of bebop was in the back of his mind when he wrote these things. He was riffing off of things that he just saw on the street, but then he would just go beyond. So the whole thing
What
was
about the syncopation?
cultured
How
by
he-
the
but-
music that he loved there in New York City.
Right.
He wrote about that too.
But was it also had to do with the syncopation of how he would deliver?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's syncopation there, and there he throws scat syllables in, and all.
Louis Armstrong-esque.
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. So yeah, and then his influence on music is a little more recherche. Although Michael Goldberg, in his brilliant essay in the same book, talks about how Bob Dylan clearly bought a copy of Desolation Angels by Kerouac, one of his later novels, in early 1965, and tons of the album that we have come to know as Highway 61 Revisited were inspired directly or stolen from phrases in Desolation Angels by Jack Kerouac. Like that thing, like in The Phantom of the Opera, in the perfect image of a priest. In the perfect image of a priest is a line from Desolation Angels by Jack Kerouac, not by Bob Dylan. So this is not to denigrate this masterpiece in any way,
No.
because what he did with what he took from Kerouac was astonishing, like writing Desolation Row. Out of that, it is equal to, if not better than, the original.
Yeah, and in some ways that's the total mantra of jazz. It's you borrow, you steal, and then you put your own interpretation on it. And Desolation Row, which I'm more familiar with, is a heady tune. I need to Kerouac. Were you? This is important. I really think this is, again, we talked about mystery before, and now we're going to talk about telepathy. Telepathy between you and your former cohort, Tim Buckley.
Yeah.
These things it wasn't like you guys sat down and were like, and Tim's like, yeah, I got this melody in my head, and then you're like, yeah, I got some lyrics, similar to Garcia Hunter, where they had kind of come together. This was more telepathy. And I want you to specifically talk about the Moroccan story.
Okay, I can talk about that, but there's another chapter to this story.
Well, then go where you need to go.
All right. So, and let's not forget the eyelids at the end of this.
Yeah.
The Moroccan story is, Tim and I had some kind of telepathic communication when we showed up at a rehearsal he had a melody and I had lyrics, and they fit together perfectly. Which was odd, since I used strange line lengths and everything. It didn't matter. It worked so well, and that was Grief in My Soul. And then we looked at each other going, okay, well, something is going on that we need to exploit further. We don't
have to figure out why. Just exploit. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time, like about a year later, when we're writing, he's listening to. He just talks about, I'm listening to Moroccan street music on this crazy album that I've got, vinyl. Back in the vinyl days.
Still happening.
And he did not play it for me.
Right.
And then I wrote this farewell song to the same person that I wrote I Can't See You to. And gave it to him, and he said it, and it seemed to have been written for the kind of music that he was listening to, even though I hadn't heard it. And he came back like 3 days later with this masterpiece, Hallucinations. Amazing kind of Moroccan street music thing with strange time signatures wrapped up in it. Yeah.
What was the eyelids?
And the eyelids, but let me go on a little bit from that. So then I thought, well, that was something that Buckley and I shared that stopped in 1975. But then, and since then, there was a long period where I only wrote privately, you may say. So there's a stack of songs up on the top of my piano. Some I used old melodies, some I wrote new melodies, some I had no melodies. But I didn't promote myself. I wasn't connected to anybody, any musicians, for like 30 years. But I still devoted myself to the craft of writing songs. And then when I started to work with Stuart Anthony, we started to notice a lot of strange things. Like the most extraordinary, I think, was where I wrote a song called Wild Roses. And he then later found out that he later found a diary of his mother who had died of premature Alzheimer's. And in the diary was marked Stuart Anthony's very first public performance, playing horn on a song, on a melody, on an American melody, classical melody called To a Wild Rose. So we thought that, and actually that was only one of many synchronicities that built up. So many, in fact, that I eventually wrote a song called Synchronicity to explore the fact that we seem to be communicating in ways that only Carl Jung would understand.
Well, you're on the same frequency.
Yeah.
You're operating on a certain...
And now I'm working with the Eyelids, Chris Lucerenko and John Moen of the Decemberists, in the greatest rock band to ever emerge from Portland. And I'm feeling the same thing. I think it's me. I think I have a way of getting into the souls of these people. I don't know how. I'm not bragging about it. I don't even know if I like it.
But they're telling you, so you know.
I'm just...
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't need
finding a way to channel
right.
the sensations in their souls without even talking to them or knowing them that well.
Right.
But once I know my subject, it's like a medium, for a living person.
Do you can you talk to the audience about following the muse? Seems like that's what's happening now with your recent collaborations.
Following the muse. That's all I've ever done.
Go back to when you first started writing poetry. I mean, you talk about inspiration. It seemed like every day in high school you had that notepad. You were writing feverishly because you saw it as a singular gift. And you were... I mean, can you talk about that feeling that you had at that time?
It's very strange because I've done a lot of things and thought a lot of things, like everybody. For many years, I was really attracted to physics and mathematical physics in particular, the work of Albert Einstein, which continues to be proved true every day.
The actual application of the...
Yeah,
wow.
But secretly, privately, I was writing. First poetic prose and then finally poetry. For years, when I finally read Howl, I started writing improvised poetry every day, every chance I got. I didn't even know what I was doing or why I was doing it. Mm-hmm. I loved language. It was flowing through me. And then a teacher named Bob Korfman, my English teacher for a couple of years in high school, had a thing where he hung an abstract painting in front of the class and asked everybody to write something about it. That was the essay of the day. And people wrote little descriptions and things like that. And I didn't think that was what I wanted to do. That wasn't enough. I wanted to recreate the painting in prose poetry. I was under the spell of James Joyce at the time, so I wrote a piece, Shiva Me Tumas, in the style of Finnegan's Wake. It took me a number of days, and then I even prefaced it with an essay to explain where I was coming from. And I handed it over to him, and well, the first thing he did was invite a lot of people out of the school district to come and hear this dude that had just surfaced in his class. And so I recited it to them. And then after they left, he said, "What are you going to be?" And I said, "A mathematical physicist." And he just laughed. And that was the Zen master's laugh, because it broke my own understanding of myself and replaced it with my current understanding. I then realized everything I've told you, that I had always been writing poetry, that I loved poetry. I don't know if I was born or made, but I couldn't not ever do anything else from that day on. And then I looked around and I saw that poetry made no money and physics made a lot of money, especially if you could get up on the Russians with some kind of weaponry. And I thought, that's fine. I'm a big rebel. So I'm going to take the path of rebellion and write poetry. Changed my life, that guy.
He was just
with his laugh.
With his laugh. That album behind you, Lenny Tristano album.
Yes.
Why is it the best live? Was it live? You said live recorded album?
Yeah, it's with Lee.
Lee Konitz.
Yeah, Lee Konitz. It's just the quartet. There, you can get it on CD. Actually, finally, the complete session. They're so Tristano is an underrated genius. I mean, he is everybody's heard of Charlie Parker or Bird and knows of the absolute brilliance of his work. Although, quite frankly, the absolute brilliance of his work in 1938 wasn't even recorded. I mean, you can get close to it in some recently released stuff, but and though Bird is a master at all times, the initial incredible vibe behind Bop wasn't recorded. It was just live. When he did Cherokee Crazy in that nightclub one night, and this went insane and invented a new music. But the only person of the day that I think, or that anybody thinks, that is comparable to Bird in terms of musical depth is Lenny Tristano. This blind piano teacher who tried to stay out of the limelight, tried to not record albums. I mean, he recorded one album.
He was running away from that.
Yeah. He was... Does it sound familiar?
But you know what? He had a profound impact directly on so many cats.
He did.
He's an incredible teacher.
And he found a new way of making music that was equally creative as Bird, but in a different direction. And Lee Konitz just slipped right into it. And the thing is, they played the Confucius Club in some Chinese restaurant. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't be more humiliating. And with people, with that you hear the cashier, the cash register chinging in the background, and people yakking, and they're playing the greatest jazz you've ever heard. Just one piece after another for like 3-hour-long sets, or 5 half-hour sets, whatever it is. Really, and he released an album, often called Lenny Tristano, with some of his studio stuff, his weird overdub stuff, his experiments with time signatures, his elegy for Bird, all that. That was the A side. The B side was 4 tracks from the Confucius Club. But the entire Confucius Club, you can never get tired of listening to, ever. You can listen to it forever. It's like Kind of Blue, only live.
Before my phone battery dies, I just would like you to talk a little bit about, do you feel that, you say that Tim comes to visit you in dreams, and it's hard to remember dreams, but do you feel like he has been his spirit and soul has kept you inspired to move in a direction that you are today musically? I mean, you could have just dropped out altogether, whereas now you're collaborating more prolifically with people that seem to be operating on the same frequency as you. So, what role does his soul and spirit still play in your creative existence? Aside from getting, royalty checks.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it. I would
Something
say,
comes along 30, 40 years ago and then resurfaces in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, both of us, our idol was Miles Davis, who was who would completely alter his musical direction with no concern for sales or commerce or those issues. It was always about what direction his art could take next, and there was complete integrity, and Tim and I both really honored that at the time. We loved him, and
along with Fred Neil, paralleling each other, kind of.
Yeah. And Tim followed a similar path through life, and so that, if anything, has been an inspiration to me. That's the way we go. That we follow the muse, like you said.
Larry Beckett, a high honor. Thank you for being part of the program.
Thanks so much, man.
Cheers. It's Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back tomorrow. Take care.